would like to introduce to you our guest this evening. Most of you are here because you're already familiar with her, and that's Edith Maxwell. She is the author of 4 different series, 2 of which she writes under her name, and the other 2 she uses a pseudonym. And I've been asked over and over why you do that, and I'm sure tonight she'll answer that, or you can ask her herself. I am not going to steal her thunder. I'm going to let her tell you about her path to being an author, because she's done other things in her life. Let's a nice round of applause for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Sue. It's a delight to be here. I was telling these ladies that I lived on Cranton Avenue for about 5 years, a few, 7, 8, 10 years ago or something. And so I was in West Newbury, but then I moved to Cranton. I got divorced and moved to a nice ranch in Cranton, and the schools were right in between our houses. And I have 2 sons who graduated from Pentucket, so I like the Pentucket district. I live in Amesbury now in an antique house, and I'm a full-time fiction writer. So I had several careers. The most recent was as a technical writer, so I was writing software manuals. I wasn't writing the software, I was writing how to use it. And, but I left that, I think 3.5 years ago, and which enables me to write more than one series, because I was writing, you know, I had a contract for books, and I was writing it around the edges of a full-time job and an hour commute. My latest job was in Burlington, and so it's only that the fact that we moved to Amesbury, we downsized from a house in Ipswich, and I said, I just got to do this full time. I'm really glad I did, because I'm living my dream, and my name's getting more and more known, and sales are picking up, and it's awesome. So some of you were talking about reading the Local Foods Mysteries. This is the 4th book. It came out last May, Murder Most Foul. And you can find information about all of my writing, my series, my short stories on my website, edithmaxwell.com. Which I'm going to mention several times. So in this series, it is in a lightly fictionalized West Newbury that I cleverly called Westbury. Food marts in it, Mill Pond, but I also invented some streets and some businesses, because you know, you don't want to kill anybody off on somebody's real farm or somebody's real shop. So authors like to do that. Even if we do use a real place, we make stuff up too. So my farmer, Cam Flaherty, lives on Attic Hill Road, which I conceived as kind of being up off of Bachelor somewhere. Right? And she inherited, she took over her great Uncle Albert's farm when he couldn't farm anymore. And you know, her first A Time to Live, A Time to Die, this group of locavores, local foods enthusiasts, start coming around, and they want to sign up for her farm share program, her CSA. And so sure, she says sure. Unfortunately, she also runs into locally sourced murder. So that presents problems. When I was living in West Newbury, about 25 years ago, I had a small certified organic farm on our property on Main Street. And it was the smallest certified organic farm in Essex County. And I had a CSA back when nobody had CSAs. Nobody had farm share programs. And people came and picked up their bags of food out of my garage every week. And my kids were little, my little boys were little. Now they're almost 28 and they're 30. And I haven't done that in a while, but it was really fun to get back into the farming world. And my younger son, my 27-year-old, actually has been working as a farmer the last few years. So I depended on him to update me about chickens, fowl. I never had chickens. I don't know anything about chickens. And hit the farm he was working at had chickens. And so that was a lot of fun. And that was my first contract with a big press, with Kensington Publishing. I didn't bring Bluffing is Murder. And my very first book, I actually got laid off a job as a tech writer. So after I was farming, I went back into high tech, and I was writing software manuals. And I was with the same place for 14 years, and I got laid off a job. I thought I had job security because I did like 5 different projects. instead, as it goes, they split up my 5 projects into 5 of my coworkers and got rid of my job. So the first thing I did after I got laid off, you get your network together, you get your resume perfect, but you can't look for a job 8 hours a day. So I wrote a short story of murderous revenge after layoff called Reduction in Force. And that was published in Best New England Crime Stories of the next year. And then I thought, well, time to get back to writing that book, because the winter after my next to last year farming, I started writing a murder mystery, which in fact ended up being basically A Time to Live, A Time to Die, the first book in this series. And but I didn't finish it, and I didn't really know that much about creative writing, so I let it sit for 14 years. And so I looked at that manuscript when I was still laid off this job, and I thought, I'm going to have to rewrite the whole thing. Because by then, so I had gotten this job as a tech writer, and I was raising little boys and working full time, and I couldn't continue writing that book. Some people do, but I was a beginner, and I'd have a half an hour on Saturday morning, while they were at the soccer practice, and I couldn't figure out how to carry the story and the plot line and the characters. But I started writing short stories instead. And I had several short stories, and I started studying creative writing and mysteries. And so instead, I started a completely different book and it ended up being called Speaking of Murder. And it featured a linguistics professor, a Quaker linguistics professor, in a town much like Ipswich, where I was living when I was writing that book. So to explain one of the pen names, so that series is published under the name Tace Baker. I had finally finished that first book. It had been 4 years. So I finished the first draft in a year. I polished it for a year. I looked for an agent. I got lots of agent rejections. I started looking at small presses because you don't need an agent. And finally found a small press that was interested in it, a reputable small press. At the same time as I had gotten a contract for the local foods mysteries. I'd gotten an agent for this series and gotten a contract with Kensington. And I'm reading this long, 40-page contract for Kensington for this series, three-book contract for 3 books. And it said basically you can't write any other book, you can't publish any other books under your name during the term of this contract. And I went, but I've been working for 4 years with this book, and I finally found a publisher. So my agent and I went back and forth with Kensington's legal department, and they said, then you have to use a pen name. So I came up with Tace Baker. Take is an archaic Quaker name, and my protagonist was a Quaker, and I like to bake. And pen names should be short. The last name should be near the top of the alphabet. Easy to spell, easy to pronounce. These are kind of you get to make up a brand new identity for yourself. And you want the URL available. You want a website, the Google search, to not find anybody else by that name. And there's nobody named Tace for the last 300 years. And there's a Quaker book catalog, and I asked if they would list it, and they said sure, even though most of their books are not crime fiction. As you can imagine, it's more spiritual books. And the guy who runs it wrote me an email. He said, I don't know if you knew this, but Tace Sowell was a woman printer publisher in London in the late 1600s. Well, I guess I picked the right name. So that's why I use a pen name for that series. And so then I wrote the second book, Muffing His Murder, and but those are both with Barking Rain Press, which is a very small press. It's good. They do the cover, they edit it, but they don't have a sales network. And so I've let that series slide because I can't write 4 books a year. They're available. I still have sales, and they're in ebook format and paperback, but I'm not writing at those anymore. Whereas Kensington, who publishes both these series, they get my books in every Barnes & Noble in the country, like the week before it releases. And so the word gets out there, and they get me reviewed in Library Journal and in Publishers Weekly and the big review sites. So it's just a different experience with a big publisher. So let's see, what was next? So I was living in Ipswich, and my boyfriend renovates antique houses, and he was done renovating our house. It was built in 1718. By the time it was done, it was too big for us and it was too expensive, and neither of my kids lived with us anymore. So we sold it and we bought a house for cash in Amesbury, so we didn't have a mortgage. And I have been a Quaker in Amesbury for 27 years. And so we moved to Amesbury to a more modest house, but plenty of room still, and I can walk everywhere. And I was walking to Quaker meeting, as Quakers have over the centuries, which was nice, because for years, for 23 years, I've been driving to church on Sunday. And I love being able to walk, it's about a 15-minute walk. And I read an article in the local paper that talked about the Great Fire of 1888. And it was the night before Good Friday, and there was a fire that swept through the carriage factories. Now, Amesbury was world famous for their carriages. They shipped them all over, so literally all over the world. And they're beautiful, the Bailey carriages, beautiful, big, graceful wheels, and they were well made and beautiful. And this fire just swept through the carriage factories, which were made of wood at that time, on Carriage Hill, which is sort of, just up on Chestnut and Oakland streets, if you know Amesbury. And so I was walking to Quaker meeting the next Sunday, and I just got a short story in my head, as happens, about a Quaker mill girl who solved the mystery of the arson of the Great Fire. Now, historically, it wasn't arson, but I write fiction, so you can fudge it a little bit. And so I wrote that short story, and I made this a Quaker mill girl who lives in my house, which was built in 1880 for the mill workers. If you know Flatbreads, the mills that are there, I just live up the street. And those were the Hamilton textile mills. And that was published in a Best New England Crime Fiction anthology for that year, that next year. And it won honorable mention in a short story award. And the characters and setting didn't want to go away. And I talked to my editor at Kensington, and he suggested that the 17-year-old mill girl wasn't really strong enough to carry a series for adults. And I didn't want to write a YA, a young adult series. I wanted to write an adult series. So I added her Aunt Rose, who's a midwife. And I wrote the first book, and my agent got me a 3-book contract with Midnight Ink, which is a mid-sized press, but a good press, and they also have a sales network out of Minnesota for the Quaker Midwife Mysteries. And I just love these books. The first book, Delivering the Truth, came out last April. And I walk everywhere in Amesbury. And so I'm, in a way, doing my research and my writing as I walk around. And a lot of the buildings that were there in 1888 are still there. Some of them aren't. There was an opera house. It burned down in 1908 or something. But and then some of the buildings that are there now, like the library's built in 1900, I can't put it in my books. It wasn't built yet. There was a previous library that John Greenleaf Whittier was on the board of directors. And so Whittier is also a secondary character in these books. And I'm a docent trainee at the Whittier Home Association, which is, just a few blocks from where I live and between where I live and the Quaker Meeting House. And he was on the building committee for the Friends Meeting House in Amesbury. And specified, I don't know if anybody's seen it, great big windows and very simple decor. So I love bringing him in as a character. And I read I have the biography, the definitive biography, and I read his letters. And I like trying to bring in, stay true to his character. But he's sort of a mentor to Rose. She'll go visit him and ask his advice about something. And so they do always say they write what you know. So this series, I had been a farmer. I had been a small farmer. I brought in a lot of that knowledge. For this series, I've been a Quaker for a long time, and I live in Amesbury. And it's just sort of fun to bring those worlds together. But I also, at the same time I was farming, I was teaching prepared childbirth classes. So I had couples come to my living room for a 6-week series and learn about their pregnancy and learn about what birth might be like and the different ways they might give birth and ways to cope with it. It wasn't specifically Lamaze or any one approach. And then they'd come back with their babies afterwards. So unhospitalized childbirth has not changed for women in hundreds of thousands. Since women have been humans giving birth, it's really not that different. what professionals know and how they deal with it. Yes, but in the late 1880s, they were starting. Some were starting to be delivered by doctors, and they're starting to be lying in hospitals. But most women had midwives for their babies, and most women had their babies at home. So I really enjoyed bringing that part into this series. And the second book will be out next April. It's called Called to Justice, and it opens on the 4th of July. And the third book I just turned in, it's probably called Turning the Tide, and it takes place during the presidential election week of 1888, where the incumbent Cleveland was running against Benjamin Harrison. And I had set up Rose's mother. She lives in distant Lawrence. Rose grew up in distant Lawrence. And her mother is a suffrage activist, as many Quakers were. Like most of the suffrage activists of the 1800s were Quakers, most of them. And but we haven't seen her yet. So in book 3, she comes to visit, and the Women's Suffrage Association of Amesbury, all the women line up on election morning across from the polls with their sunflower yellow sashes and their placards, you know, give women the vote. And I have a whole scene. Just lost her name. Anyway, I can't believe I just lost her name. A prominent woman suffrage activist comes and supports them. And there's murder too, but she doesn't get murdered. So that one was a lot of fun to write, and there'll be at least one more, and I'm hoping many more in this series. And then somewhere in there, I talked to my agent. I have a really good agent, and we talk about the future. So this book was this series was a 3-book contract, and I wasn't sure if they were going to renew it for more, and I sent in a proposal for 3 more books. They gave me 2 more books. And then after that, and the sales on this series have been good, but not spectacular. And so I'm talking with my agent, and he says we should get something else in the pipeline. Okay, how do we do that? You know, this is a couple years ago, and we were throwing around some ideas, and I said, well, what about like a country store breakfast and lunch restaurant in southern Indiana? And he said, oh, I love that idea. It turns out he used to spend summers with his grandmother in southern Indiana. So, and I got a PhD in linguistics in southern Indiana, and it's a really beautiful part of the country. So, you know, Indiana's flat down to Martinsville, south of Indianapolis, and they say it's because the glacier stopped. The glacier came down, and that's why the northern Midwest is flat. Southern Indiana's hilly and beautiful. Looks like Vermont or New Hampshire. There's maple sugaring, there's apple trees, and some friends of mine in the linguistics were dropped out of the linguistics graduate program, and they bought this rundown general store in Brown County, Indiana, and they fixed it up, and we all helped them do the demolition, and we all came to the grand opening. So my editor at Kensington, the same editor and publisher as this series, said, sure, let's do it, but I want you to use a pen name. I said, well, I asked my agent, why? You know, people are just starting to know Edith Maxwell. He said they want it to look like a debut author in the bookstores. So I think it's because the sales on this series has not been spectacular, they don't want to link that series with this series. And in fact, the sales on this series have been spectacular. I mean, it's just been selling thousands and thousands. So, cool. So I created Maddie Day as my name for this one. I don't even know why. And in fact, it's not a unique. There's other Maddie Days out there. So my Twitter handle has to be Maddie Day Author, because Maddie Day is a person. But anyway, it's been doing quite well. This is the first book, Flipped for Murder. Grilled for Murder is book 2. And you have a cover flat of the 3rd book. It'll be out at the end of March when the grits hit the fan. And the 4th book is Biscuits and Slashed Browns. And I just finished the first draft of that a couple weeks ago. So there'll be at least, after this, at least 2 more books in this series. And it's a lot of fun, and it came out in a different voice. It came out funnier. The police lieutenant uses all kinds of dialect, you know, local southern Indiana dialect, which is sort of more Kentucky than Indiana. You know, phrases like, well, that went faster than green grass through a goose. You know, and I have so much fun looking those up online and finding, you know, colorful Southern phrases. And not everybody talks like that. And Robbie Jordan, my protagonist, is actually from Santa Barbara, California. But her mother was from this little town of South Lick that I invented. So she doesn't talk like she's a Hoosier.
And taking that from an actual town in southern Indiana.
Well, French Lick is a
French
southern
Lick,
town.
yeah.
But in Brown County, where I put this, so it's a fictional town, but there is a South Lick Creek that I drove past.
The people in the Massachusetts area know French Lick.
Yeah, of course, right.
The
They're
bird.
right, yeah.
What college? I'm from Ohio.
I went to Indiana University
That's what I thought.
in Bloomington. Yeah. And actually,
Been there.
it was really great to
No,
go to
been to
Indiana University
Bloomington.
because my great-great-great-grandfather, David Hervey Maxwell, was the founder of the university.
Oh,
He's the one who lobbied the state legislature to have a men's seminary, which ended up being the university. And there's a Maxwell Hall on campus, and there's Maxwell Street, and Maxwell Lane, and all the male Maxwells, including my dad, had studied there. So it was a great place to be, and it's quieter and slower, but Bloomington is a huge town because it's the flagship university.
Right.
But it's like being in a little town, but having all the cultural, you can go to opera, you can go to the food co-op, you can go to political stuff, you can do any of that, or ignore it all and just walk around. So that's the story of that series. As it turns out, this series is going to end after the next book, which is Mulch Ado About Murder. And that'll be out next May. Because in fact, the sales were not spectacular, and the publisher is a business, you know. So I wrote a proposal for a new series. Because what would I do only writing 2 books a year? And my publisher bought it. It's going to be another Maddie Day series. And it's the Cozy Capers Book Group Mysteries. And it's going to be set in a fictional town on Cape Cod with a woman who owns a bicycle repair and rental shop and hosts a book group that reads only cozy mysteries. So these are, if you don't know the term, cozies are like Miss Marple mysteries or Murder, She Wrote. They're village-based. Sometimes there's crafts, sometimes there's knitters or needleworkers, but sometimes there's farmers and sometimes there's chefs. These series both have recipes in the back too. But one of the main things is that there's justice is restored to the village at the end. And a village can be a little village in Seattle or in New York City. It doesn't have to be a physical village, but I tend to write about actual small towns. Justice is restored at the end, and there's no, and these are negatives, which is a weird way to define something, but there's no gratuitous violence, there's no sex, and there's no swearing. So there's romance, but they close the bedroom door before it gets too explicit. There's, they find a body, but you don't see shoot 'em ups, you don't see blood spurting out, you know, the violence is off the page. And you might read he swore or she cursed, but you're not going to read a string of obscenities. And that's fine with me. I like reading books like that. My mother wouldn't have read anything but, and my mother taught me to read mysteries. We had a living room full of murder mysteries when I was growing up. So there's some kind of talk in the mystery field like, well, they're not as good as Jack Reacher or, you know, kind of the noir or thrillers but you know what, we got a lot of readers. There are a lot of really dedicated cozy readers, and that's fine with me. I want to put in a little plug for the Wicked Cozy authors. So, and I ran out of bookmarks. We usually have bookmarks. There's a group of 6 of us, New England Cozy Mystery Authors, and we blog every weekday at wickedcozyauthors.com. And we have a lot of fun. Every Wednesday we do Wicked Wednesday, and we each chime in on a topic. And we have guests, and we have sometimes we put up a photograph, and we each make up a first line for it, and we encourage our commenters, you know, to write their first lines. So check it out if you can. And all the other authors, Barbara Ross, Sherry Harris, Liz Mugavero, Jessie Crockett, and Julie Henricus are all fabulous. And they each have, and some of us now have several series and several names, and but Wicked Cozy Authors is a great place to find that. And then this is, it's historical, it's shelved as a historical, but it's really sort of a cozy. I mean, it's village-based. She's a Quaker, so there's definitely no swearing. It's 1888, and she's a Quaker, so there's no sex. And it's village-based. You know, there's crime that she solves, my midwife. It's fun writing about a midwife as a sleuth, as an amateur sleuth, because she can go places that detective could never go, right? She goes into women's bedrooms. And she listens to women in labor, who often sometimes tell secrets that they might not otherwise voice. You know, so she can get around and learn things and see things that the detective can't. In this book, she and Detective Donovan have a little bit of an adversarial relationship. By book 3, they're kind of working together. And there's a continuing tension in these books, so she's fond of, enamored of a doctor who is not a Quaker, who's from Newburyport. And his mother is not happy about this, because they're more society people, and he's a good guy, but it kind of is continuing tension. Are they gonna get together? Are they ever gonna get married? So read it, tune in to find out. So do people have questions?
Well, you know, I'm from Amesbury, and I didn't really know much about the carriage industry. One of the things I read around town, you know, I haven't been there that long. But my husband and I took a walk along a trail that is the Ghost Trail. It has all the information about. And then all of a sudden, your book came up at the Amesbury Library. I was like, "Whoa, this is pretty cool." So I'm like, "I gotta read your book."
Great.
So I started to know more and more, and so your book was, you know, interesting because I get to walk around some of the things that you talk about.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Yeah, and it was actually named Amesbury's All Community Read for this summer.
Yeah.
That's right, I forgot.
Yeah, and the Whittier Home and the Amesbury Library did that, and then the Whittier Home put on a fabulous staged reading of the scenes in the book between Whittier and Rose.
Yeah.
And our poet laureate, Lainey Seneschal, wrote a script tying it all together. And so I read that script, and then we had actors for Whittier and Rose. I was at the Friends Meeting House, we had like 100 people in there, we packed them in September. It was very nice.
You mentioned that one time after you'd written at least 1 or 2 books, and you were kind of in between, didn't have the time, and you were developing a short story. How do you feel about the difficulty writing a novel versus writing a short story? I've heard some authors say it's more difficult to write a short story than it is a full novel.
It's just a different beast. I like writing both of them, and I do. In a novel, you have room to explore subplots and
You can develop your characters.
fully drawn
more, so.
characters. In fact, I tend to write my first drafts way too sparse, and I end up like 20,000 words less than my publisher expects. But I know by now, because I've finished 14 novels, I'll fix it. Like in my revision process, when I'm making sure all the senses are in it, and you know, I tend to write a scene, and then the next scene just starts. And I'm in a critique group, and they often say, "Shouldn't she react to just what just happened? That was a big thing that just happened." I know what she was reacting. I just forgot to write it down. So I always get up to my word count. So a short story, every word has to count. Every character. If that character isn't integral to that story, no, you know, at least don't name them. Preferably don't even describe them. One plot, like one thing. It's about one story. It's about one thing. And especially the word count. So the anthology that I usually submit to is 3,000 to 5,000 words. And sometimes I'm bumping up against that 5,000 and I've got to cut stuff. But when you start cutting, there's always stuff you can cut. You know, I don't need that. And then if it's shorter, if it's 2,000 or 600 words. So my very first published fiction, my second published fiction, I won, I think it was 1994, and at the time there was like a weekly arts magazine that went with the North Shore newspapers. it came with the Gloucester paper and the Newburyport Daily News. And they had a Christmas flash fiction contest, 600 words maximum.
Mm.
And I won one of my stories won that. My first published fiction, I'll have to tell you this because I only recently discovered it. I was 11, and I'm from Southern California, and the Pasadena Star News had a contest, and I wrote a little short story called The Viking Girl, and I won the contest, and they printed it in the paper, and they paid me $2. A long time ago. And I found it in an old scrapbook, like last year. I was going through stuff in the basement. I went, oh, wow. And it actually has a story arc and everything. So, you know, it's about 3 paragraphs or something. But, and I have to keep remembering to talk about finished novels because I did write lots of nonfiction books when I was a technical writer. I wrote software manuals, but completely different animal than fiction, than mysteries. But yeah, so short stories have completely different. I like writing both. I like that challenge. Also, seeing if I can get a good twist in the end. You know, leading people this way, and then
Red herrings, call them.
well, we drop the. I mean, I use red herrings in my books too, of course. So they're false clues, and in my books, I'm not really much of a plotter by nature. Like what we call it, writing by the seat of your pants or writing into the headlights, you know? Like if you're driving to Maine from here at night, you can't see Maine, but you drive as far as your headlights, and then you drive as far as your headlights, and then you get to Maine. That's the way I like to write. I set up my characters, and I follow them around and write down what they do, and I'm surprised when they do stuff. I have a scene in a book that there's a dinner at a restaurant, and there's like 10 people around a table, and I'm just typing along, you know, and this woman falls off her chair. And I'm looking at her on my keyboard, I'm going, oh, did she have a heart attack? Was she poisoned? Why did she fall over? I have no idea why she fell over, but I wrote it. And I have to keep typing so I can figure out what happened to her. Because I have no idea what happened. It's almost channeling. It's not always that magical. Like sometimes writing is work and it's just work. But when it's magical like that, it's really great. It keeps you coming back. So I sometimes in my books I'll set up 4 or 5 likely suspects, and I'm 2/3 of the way through the book, and I still don't know who the killer was, who the villain was. I'm thinking, okay, I got to pick one of these. I got to make this work. And then once I do that, then because a mystery is a puzzle, I have to go back and make all the rest of it work in my revision phase and drop those red herrings, those false clues, and tie off all the real clues, because I have to be fair to my reader too. I can't just leave a clue and not have you know how it was resolved at the end. So I'm in a revision phase now with book 4 of this series, with Biscuits and Slash Browns, and that's one of the things I'm doing. I'm just making sure I tidy up all that stuff. Yeah.
Do you feel like you've improved since your first one? I mean, you just keep getting better and better. And
I do. I do feel like I've improved. It's interesting. Both from being in this critique group almost every Monday for 6 or 7 years with some other good writers. We're not all exactly at the same page, but they're good critique providers, critiquers. And they say things like that thing that I said where I start a scene and I don't ever react to what happened in the last scene. Now I know that and I write it in. Like they don't tell me that anymore because I've learned to do that. You see, you learn as you go along. And then my books, I get all my books edited before I turn them into my editor, my publisher. And I learn things from that too. Like I'm always having people shrug. People are shrugging like every other paragraph. You know, use another description. Or they're striding. In one of my books, my friend Sherry edits these books before I turn them in. She says, you know, everybody's striding everywhere or marching everywhere. Oh, okay. Like everybody can't be striding all the time. Some people stroll and some people just walk. I was trying to not use the verb walk, instead over-airing using stride. But just all kinds of little things that I keep, of course I have lots to learn, lots and lots to learn. Yeah, and I keep taking workshops, online workshops and master classes and, yeah, you never stop learning.
Where do you get your recipes that you published in the?
Well, that's a good question. Some of them I just kind of, I've been making them for years and I put one of those in. Some I might find one online and play with it, you know, use it sort of as a guideline, which is kind of how I cook anyway. I mean, if I'm baking a cake, I'll follow a recipe exactly. But otherwise, I'll kind of, maybe I'll look at a recipe for curry or something. I'll think, well, I don't have that, but I could use this, and I'm gonna add that, and I don't have eggplant, but I'll put in this. And that's kind of how I cook anyway.
So if I went to the grog, I couldn't get that stew.
Yeah, I don't think so. Excuse me, I've got a little nagging dry cough. To get it. So it varies, but I always test them. And I live with a tall, thin man who loves having recipes tested on him. He never gains weight, and he likes all kinds of foods, and I can just test everything. So
That's good.
he likes that. Yeah.
It seems like that your books, you've either lived in the area or you're very familiar with the area. Now the series that you do on Cape Cod, how are you gonna research that, or are you familiar with that
That's a
area?
good question, because I'm not that familiar with Cape Cod. However, there's a wonderful Quaker retreat house in West Falmouth, where I've stayed a couple times. I was just there about a month ago for a few days. And for $35 a night, I have this whole house and the kitchen and everything. And no internet. So it's great. There's no Wi-Fi in it. The library's across the street, but so it's great for focusing on my writing. And I've already booked another week in a couple months to go in. And just, you know, kind of soak up the flavor and listen to how people talk. And Google is helpful. Books are helpful. Excuse me. When I was down there last time, I visited the Mashpee.
There's Kleenex if you need it. I don't know.
Thank you.
Might be
The
on-
Mashpee Indian Heritage Center or something like that.
Sorry, I'm suffering there. I feel bad for her.
I was afraid I would start coughing. Because I want to have my state police detective be half Mashpee.
Oh, okay.
We sort of bridging those worlds. And I know some people who have houses down there. So it's kind of a combination of things. This is research. I don't live in 1888 too.
Right,
And I don't live in southern Indiana. I've gone back a couple times and I have a sister who lives north of Indianapolis, but to a certain extent, but I don't think this is going to work with Cape Cod, but certain details I can kind of not specify if I don't know it. This is one reason I don't write police procedurals, because I didn't want to learn all those details. You know, I didn't want to have a police detective be my protagonist or anything, because you really have to get that right. And that's just another level of research and embedding and stuff. So, but I'm going to do my best. I'm a little worried about a book that I'm going to set in the middle of summer on Cape Cod, which means I have to go to Cape Cod in the summer. And yes, you know, you can't get there from here. I'll work it out. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the reason is that your Maddie Day series seemed to be more successful than the local foods mysteries, which I happen to really love?
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry to hear that
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah,
writing anymore after
right.
the next one.
I do not know. As I said, the voice came out different. It came out sort of funnier. If I try to write funny, it's going to be terrible. I don't know how to write funny, but it just came out. It just comes out that way in book after book. Maybe people, you know, have this idealized image of this little Midwestern town where not that much bad happens except the occasional murder. I don't really know. That's a good question. Maybe I'm a better writer by now than the first couple books in this series. It's also, this is my theory too, these come out in hardcover. And 11 months later, they come out in mass market paperback.
Oh.
So this is book 3 after it came out in small paperback. It came out in they all come out in hardcover. You have a hardcover of the first book out there. And people who read cozies don't buy hardcovers. Like these are, you know, $8 books or less, right? The list price of these is $24. I mean, Amazon has them for 19 or something, but still, that's a lot of money. When my agent told me about my contract, he said it's hardcover first, and then 11 months later, mass market. And I said, hardcover? Who buys hardcovers? That's what I said.
Libraries.
But libraries buy them, and collectors, people are collecting this. But I think that's part of for the cozy market. It's very, Kensington was just getting into cozies when we got these contracts. And I think they were experimenting with this one. Like the Wicked Cozy authors, 4 of us got contracts with Kensington at the same time. And they are all in this size and price. I think they were playing around with it. Sometimes a cozy will move into hardcover at like book 10 when an author has done really well. It's just unusual and it's expensive. So I think that's part of it too.
I was wondering if that might not.
Yeah,
have
yeah. I mean, libraries do like
But
them.
I will tell you, I bought your last 2 in that series in hardcover. So.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. That's very nice.
You mentioned that a lot of them are also on ebook, right?
Yeah, they're all my books are on
All
on
on ebook?
Sure. Yeah, in all formats. You know, Nook, Kindle, book, whatever it is. Yeah.
iPad.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention that on my website, EdithMaxwell.com, I have a number of short stories that have appeared in juried anthologies, competitive anthologies, that I get the rights to back after the first year or something. And I've reissued them as short ebooks. And I've got them all listed on my website. In addition, some of the Wicked Cozies and a couple of other cozy authors, we put out a short ebook anthology called Edgar Allan Cozy last year on Poe's birthday. And they're short stories based on short stories or poems of Poe's, but they're set at a contemporary fictional Raven Harbor, Maine. And mine is based on the Telltale Heart. So it's called Edgar Allan Cozy. And I thought I had a bunch of these, and I only have a couple.
Can I make a copy of that? Or
Hmm?
can I have a copy of it just so people, or can I make a copy
Sure,
of it?
sure. Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I have one more at home. I wanted also, I send out an author newsletter sort of 4 or 5 times a year. I never give away names, and it's with MailChimp, so you don't see the other names. If anybody wants to sign up, I'll just pass this around. Pass it around. If you don't, no problem. Sometimes people are interested in like my writing schedule. I write by 7 every morning, but Sunday. I'm usually at my desk by 6, but I'm always an early riser. But I set myself a word count goal when I'm writing a first draft. I can't do anything else. And I usually get that done like 1,500 words, 2,000 words by about 11 in the morning. But it's like, this is my job. I'm not retired. This is my job, and it's a lot of work. So I write every morning. I don't write Sunday morning, because then I go off to Quaker meeting and we sit in silence. And if I've been working on my book Sunday morning, I'm thinking about my book. Storylines and ideas, and I want to go out and write something down. So I don't work Sunday morning. Take a day off. But that enables me to write a first draft in about 2 months. And then that gives me another couple of months to sort of polish it, revise it. And then I try to save my afternoons for the business of writing blog posts and arranging speaking events and all the other considerable. And I usually go for my speed walk at about 11. And if I don't know what's happening in my book the next day, writing into the headlights and somebody turned the headlights off, I talk out loud to myself on the Riverwalk, on the rail trail in Amesbury, and I've always got my phone, and ideas just arise. and I'll dictate an email to myself and walk on, so. So my exercise is also part of my work. Yeah.
You said you had an editor who looks at your books.
Yeah.
Do you also have a group of friends, acquaintances, readers who read your book and give you, before it goes to the editor, to give you input on it?
Yeah, for these books, I have a midwife, a current practicing midwife, who's also a mystery fan. And she reads this with attention to the birth scenes. Because, again, it's been a while, and I wasn't a midwife, I did labor support, and I'd studied childbirth, but I wasn't actually a midwife. So she reads it. I don't really have a beta reader or a group like that.
Do any of your other authors?
Some people do.
Yeah.
Some people do. With my first sort of 5 or 6 books, I read every scene to my writing group, to my critique group.
Okay.
But now I write way too much to be able to take scenes every Monday, and other people have to read too, So, but at least one person always reads it, and like when the independent editor reads it, she'll read it straight through first. They always just read it straight through as if they're just a reader, and see if it makes sense, and maybe make some notes, and then they'll go back through and make detailed notes about it. But yeah, I don't know, I didn't ever really develop I know I have lots of people I could call on, but I don't seem to need that, yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Were you the moderator of the Groveland Town meeting?
Yeah, I was.
When I lived here, you were, yeah.
I retired.
Oh, good. Well, I don't want to keep you here forever. Thank you all so much. I do have books for sale. Everybody's got a bookmark. Take those home. Newsletter. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and trying to get on Instagram, but I'm not very good at that. The young people use Instagram. I'm told that's what I should be doing. we can only do so much. So. But if you're on Facebook, find me. Sometimes we do contests on the Wicked Cozy site or on my Facebook page. So, and thank you all for coming. It's been lovely.